Yo, what's going on? Freakydude99 here, and the footage you're currently seeing is from the Legend Heist Battlegrounds, and then you'll see footage from my solo Legend Seraph Station run. And as you can see from the gameplay, it is pretty nuts. The uptime on the abilities is very good, and the general just funness of the build it's pretty nice. Arc is not bad this season, and I wasn't sure how this build would perform, especially in this season with the harder content and the crazy amount of enemies that the current activities throw at you. But with this build, with the solid arc weapon, you can pretty much clear through everything and brute force through any activity. So let's get into it. Starting off with the subclass, of course, we're going Striker Titan, and we're running Thunder Crash. You can obviously run Fist of Havoc, it is a personal choice thing. Next up for the class ability, we're running Thruster, purely because its cooldown is lower, it's really fast to use, and it has a better flow with this build, as you'll soon see. Of course, we're using Strafe Lift, and we're using Thunderclap for our melee. Now, of course, again with the super, you can use Ballistic Slam or you can use Seismic Strike. It is a personal choice. I just like Thunderclap because you can get some pretty crazy damage from a full charge melee, and it can take down some shields that you might not have the right weapon for, or just an enemy that you're trying to take down as quickly as possible. Then I love to use Pulse Grenade. Pulse Grenade is just lovely with this build, as its damage output is crazy good. For the first aspect, we're using Touch of Thunder. This makes it so our Pulse Grenades have enhanced functionality. This means it creates ionic traces periodically as it damages targets and increases in damage over time. So, whenever we throw it, it's going to spawn ionic traces which give us ability energy back, as well as it's just going to increase in damage over time, which means we're going to be pumping out insane amounts of damage. And then for our second aspect, we're using Knockout. Critically wounding a target or breaking their shield infuses your melee attacks with arc energy and increases your melee range and damage for a short time. Defeating targets with a melee attack starts health regeneration and makes you amplified. That is wonderful in endgame content because when you have lots of little enemies like thralls or dregs, you can get a quick one hit or a two hit melee off and get some healing back, and you really don't notice it until you're in those life-threatening situations where your health bar is all the way down and you get a quick melee off and boom, you're healing up and you don't even realize how quickly it just saved you. That's it for the aspects. Now, moving on to the fragments. Starting off, we're going to be using Spark of Ions. Defeating a jolted target creates an ionic trace. This pairs wonderfully with the next fragment, Spark of Shock. Your arc grenades jolt targets. This is a wonderful combination because, as you remember, our pulse grenade already creates an ionic trace on hit. And then as well as it's going to be applying a jolt, which is then going to be creating another ionic trace when it kills the jolted enemy. So we're going to get our abilities back even faster with every single one of those ionic traces that are spawning. And then of course for our third fragment, we're going to be using Spark of Magnitude. This makes it so our lingering arc grenades like Pulse Grenade have extended duration. Now, of course, as the longer our Pulse Grenade is out and the more pulses it does, the more damage it does, as well as it's spawning ionic traces and it's jolting targets. This is just wonderful. Our grenades become so powerful with this build. And then finally, for some wonderful survivability, Spark of Resistance. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. This is wonderful because it gives us some amazing survivability that we truly need on the Arc class. Now, moving on to the weapons. Now, of course, you know with my builds, they're very fluid with what kind of weapons you can use. The main crux of this one is having a weapon that has Voltshot. Now of course Brigand's Law from last season and the Ikelos SMG from this season are wonderful options. They both have Voltshot. I know there are some other weapons that you can get Voltshot on. Anything that applies Jolt is what you're looking for, because of course, as you remember from our fragments, defeating a jolted target makes it so we spawn an ionic trace and get our abilities back faster. This is going to be great for whenever we don't have our grenade up, don't have our melee up, and we're really looking to get our abilities back and get back into that flow that we might have gotten out of because we messed up or missed an ability. Now, next up, I of course am using Revision 0 because of the anti-barrier rounds. You can use any other pulse rifle or Wither Horde, which I did use in the Seraph station because you don't need to deal with any champions in there. And then for my heavy, I use Storm Chaser or I use Cataclysmic. You can use any linear fusion rifle or any heavy you really want. I use Storm Chaser just because it pairs very nicely with Monochromatic Maestro, which I personally just love running, and it's just a wonderful addition to this build. So that is it for the weapons. Starting off with the armor, we're going to be going into the exotic Precious Scars. Precious Scars is one of my favorite exotics because it has the armor perk Kintsugi. Final blows from weapons with the damage type matching your subclass energy create a burst of healing around you. After reviving or being revived, you gain an aura that provides overshields to you and nearby allies. So, anytime we get a kill with our Brigand's Law or our Ikelos SMG or any arc weapon that we're using, we're getting a burst of healing. And this healing is so useful, especially on the arc class, because you can't imagine how dangerous it really is whenever you're not on solar or void, something where you have overshields constantly applied to you or just healing constantly running. And then, of course, we're running solar energy because we can take advantage of bountiful wells. Any elemental well that we spawn is going to instead spawn 2. And then, of course, we're running Harmonic Siphon. Rapid weapon final blows with our arc weapons are going to create an orb of power. We're running Ashes to Assets, so any kills we get with our grenade is going to fund our super energy. And then we are trying to stack up our resilience to 100 and our discipline to 100 with this build. And then of course, if you can get your recovery or your strength up, that is up to you and the rules that you have on your armor. Moving on to the gauntlets, we're going to be running Void Energy so we can use Reaping Wellmaker. After we activate our class ability, the next kill we get is going to spawn an elemental well, more specifically a Void Elemental Well. Now this is very important for the build, and as you remember, we're using Thruster, which 1 has a low cooldown and 2 is very quick to use, as you just do a little thrust and you don't have to worry about placing down a barricade, which takes a number of seconds. Then of course for your gauntlet 2 middle mods, you can use any champion mod that you're personally using to pair up with your weapons, or use Bolstering Detonation and Focusing Strike to get your class ability energy back even faster. Next, with the chest piece, we're running Void Energy again, so we can use Well of Tenacity. Picking up a Void Elemental Well reduces the damage you take from combatants for a short period of time. This is wonderful, as getting another bonus resist and more damage reduction for arc is wonderful, as it really needs it. And if you remember, we're using Reaping Wellmaker so we can actually spawn that Void Well that we need. Then for the 2 middle mods, of course, you can use anything you want. You can use reserves, you can use damage resistance. Personally, it's up to you. Me, for the Legend solo Seraph station, I use sniper damage resistance and then energy diffusion substrate, just because there's so many different damage types in there with the Fallen and the Hive, as well as you have a lot of sniper shanks in there, and getting just that little bit of resistance is always very nice to have. Down to the boots, we are using Void Energy again, so that way we can use Well of Utility. Whenever we're picking up those 2 Void Wells that we spawn with Reaping Wellmaker, not only are we getting damage resist, but they're going to give us additional class ability energy. This is wonderful as it allows us to use our class ability again and spawn more Void Wells, which then grant us additional class ability energy, and then we just stay in that loop, that constant loop of thruster, kill, and then of course for the middle 2 I am using Better Already, as getting that health regeneration whenever you pick up an Orb of Power is wonderful, as hey, anything to boost that survivability is much appreciated. And then finally, for the class item, I am using Stasis Energy with Elemental Time Dilation. Now, Elemental Time Dilation is only affecting our Well of Tenacity, which is our damage resistance, but I honestly think it's really important to have, just because bumping it up to that 7 seconds of damage resist is just so nice, because as you're doing that loop, it is about 7 to 10 seconds between your class ability and like getting that kill off. So having extra time to not worry about trying to get that kill or trying to spawn a well is always nice, as it brings the pressure down and the fun up of the build, I find. Then we are using low entropy superconductor, so our arc melee is strong against unstoppable champions. Unstoppable champions are just really annoying this season, and no one really wants to run unstoppable grenade launcher or unstoppable hand cannon, so this frees up your loadout when you're going into something like Legend Heist Battlegrounds. You can just use your melee, not worry about a hand cannon or a grenade launcher. And then I'm using Monochromatic Maestro. This makes it so whenever we deal arc damage with our abilities, it makes it so our arc weapons deal more damage, and then whenever we deal arc damage with our weapons, our arc abilities do more damage. Now this is why I use Storm Chaser in the Seraph Station solo, because it just gives that extra bonus. Of course, in the solo, I could have been using something like Solo Operative, but I just wanted to see how well the build could perform just by using Monochromatic Maestro, as most of the time you are going to be in some sort of co-op activity, especially in the Legend Heist, or in a raid or something like that. So Monochromatic Maestro is wonderful, but of course if you're in something solo, I do just recommend running Solo Operative and getting the straight bonus. And that is it for the build. Now, this build has been wonderful to playtest and try out. Arc, of course, is not what I'd consider the best build for Titan, especially when you have something like Void and Solar Titan out there, and then the sheer fun that is Stasis Titan. Arc is definitely a little bit on the back burner, especially because getting that insane damage off with Thunder Crash really requires you to use the Cuirass of the Falling Star. But I think with the Precious Scars Exotic and the versatility in the weapons of using whatever primary and heavy you want, and just having to really use a Voltshot weapon, or even just an arc weapon, like you're not really restricted to a Voltshot weapon, it just ensures that you get your abilities back faster. Now of course in the gameplay here, this is me in the Heist Legend Battleground, and I am just using Brigand's Law for the most part here. And as you can see, I'm not doing crazy damage, but my survivability is pretty insane. I'm able to take a lot of hits, sometimes even take a direct hit from Kel'Garath, which as you can see, he hits for a lot. If you've played, you know he hits for a lot, and he one-shots you most of the time. So being able to take any kind of hit from him is just a wonderful proof of the type of survivability this arc build really has. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much everyone for watching the videos and subscribing. The support has just been amazing and the views have just been blowing up. It's honestly been like a little bit of like pressure, and I've just been a little, whoa, okay, I really have to make sure I'm giving you guys something good here. I'm giving you, you know, something quality, something I can be proud of, and something that at least entertains you to some extent, or that you watch and you come away being like, yeah, that was a good video. So thank you so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy this build, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace out, everyone.